That's correct.
Great. So thank you very much for coming. So we are going to start presentation. So first let me introduce the guest speakers. So we are very lucky to have today with us Dr. Lisa Hausen, who is a researcher and a practitioner in the area of emotional intelligence for many years. She works and researches in EMU Business School, which is in France. And she specializes in different aspects of emotional intelligence, as well as the application and the training and development aspects related to it. We also have with us Anna Kampova, who is mostly a practitioner in terms of therapy. She will tell you a little bit more about that, as well as an occupational psychologist. And together they have developed a certain number of applications and cases where emotional intelligence can be used to develop and increase the emotional competencies of managers. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
I'll let you start.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you. So I will directly start that we go up for emotional intelligence because our problem often is that we are so passionate about what we are doing, and I think we have a limited amount of time, so we will try to stay in. We have 1 hour, 30 minutes. That's it. With questions, okay. So we directly zoom in emotional intelligence. So first of all, why talk about emotional intelligence at the workplace and particularly in management and leadership? So today we have plenty of studies. They are about the last 30 years because it's still a young topic. And this research, they clearly point that there are 4 big reasons why to develop emotional intelligence in managers and leaders. And when you develop it in manager and leader, so you will develop it in your whole organization. That's the idea, actually. So there are 4 main reasons. First of all, and that's, I think, the reason why emotional intelligence went into organizations, it's because emotions can enhance performance. So there are studies, they look at specific emotions, and how they will impact managerial activities. For example, we have studies about emotions and decision-making. Here we can have some emotions that will help decision-making, others that can encounter decision-making. For example, we have joy, studies on joy. Joy, what is joy? It's a really nice emotion to feel, but in decision-making it can be quite disturbing. Because if I feel joy, I will take high risks. So it's really, I can overestimate my abilities, overestimate the success of the project, and not be careful enough, not deploy enough attention. So in decision-making process, joy, at least at high intensities, can really be disturbing. On the other hand, we have studies about fear, for example, that will moderate risk-taking and can therefore help in decision-making process. So that is a whole area that looks about emotion and performance. We talk about decision-making. We find these studies in negotiation. We will find it in brainstorming, creativity, innovation. So that is a whole area. And I think that's the area that made emotional intelligence popular in organizations. Another area, it's about really well-being. Well-being. Today we know that people, they know how to manage, enhance their well-being. So what it is about is emotionally intelligent people, they know how to handle stress-linked emotions. So anxiety in a task, evaluation anxiety. These are emotions they know how to handle, and they know to be in a certain balance. So for one unpleasant emotion, what we observe is we need like minimum 3, best 5 pleasant emotional experiences. So these emotionally intelligent persons know how to balance it. And the emotionally intelligent manager, he knows also how to guarantee this emotional climate in a team. And so he guarantees well-being, and if you feel well, yes, you really can perform because you are not like in a rumination process that gathers your attention. You are like totally available for your task. So that's about well-being. We also have less anxiety disorders, depression disorders, burnout, and so on. Next, so this was 2 reasons. Next, it's also about physical health. Today we know emotions can affect our physical health. For example, if you have a lot of anger, anger can attack your cardiovascular system because it's really, your heart rate goes up and you're breathing, and so you have more oxygen in your bloodstream, and so that are risk factors for some diseases. So we know today health and emotion are connected. And also, pleasant emotions, they reinforce the immune system. Morning. So that is also interesting in organizations, because in organizations, and especially managers, they have to perform, but in time. It's not just a peak. Often in organizations you have project and it's several months, and then you just finish it. You are not just taking a yoga session meditation, but often you just go into the next project. And so you really have to be careful about your physical health. And if you have a lot of frustration, irritation, so it can really alter your health. And emotionally intelligent people know how to prevent health by intelligent emotion management. A last factor, it's about relationship. What we see is that people who can express pleasant emotions enhance the quality of their relationship. Because if I express, yeah, I feel satisfied, we work together, I'm proud of what we did, so I show to the other person that we are on the right, on the good, continue as we are doing. If I express also my anger or my frustration because we work together and it worked not as well as I wanted. And if I express this is an opportunity to develop our relationship in a more satisfying way. And that's really interesting because we see emotionally intelligent managers, they give both feedback. They handle both types of emotion and use it to enhance relationships, the quality of relationship. So that are at least 4 reasons why develop emotional intelligence at the workplace. So we already talked a lot about emotional intelligence, but what do emotionally intelligent persons and especially managers do? So first of all, they welcome emotions. It seems perhaps a little bit easy step, but it's a quite complicated step when we work and help people to connect to this intelligence. The first thing is really to welcome emotions and all emotions. We all have emotions we welcome more easily than others. Welcome joy is perhaps easier than welcome fear. And this could be much more easier to welcome envy or contempt. And that's what we see emotionally intelligent people. They just welcome all kinds of emotion. Other way said, there's no taboo emotion. So that is really important. And when we work with people, we really try to work on this. And sometimes we have taboo emotion. We are not really, first time I find out in a person I worked with that pride can be a taboo emotion. Sometimes emotions can be taboo. From our perspective, they are totally okay, but others it's not easy to connect with. So that's really the first step. Second step, when they welcome it, they identify it. So which emotion, which are the triggers, what are the needs? So they have this analyze phase. And then they transform it. They transform the emotion in resource to help them to perform, to help them to guarantee well-being in a given situation, their own, but also this of another person or a group. And that's the quality of manager, always working on the relation to other and group. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, you hear it, there's emotion and we have intelligence. And we will apply the intelligence on the emotion. Masha will introduce this intelligence component in just a few minutes. So take just a minute to talk about what is emotion. So emotion, they are actually there to help us to better adapt to our environment. So that's a long time. It goes back to Darwin. Darwin was the first person who said emotions have adaptive value. So nature doesn't invent emotions just to hijack us. It's a really value. Why are they values? They have a message. If emotion could talk, they will tell you always a message. For example, fear would tell you, be careful, there's a danger. Anger tells you, yeah, there's injustice, or my personal space was a bit disturbed. So each emotion has a message. Joy will say, the environment is secure. After, each emotion has a specific role to help us in an adaptive way. Fear enhances our attention process, helps us to go to action and have quick decision-making process. So this is a specific role of fear. Also, emotions support action. Emotion comes from emovere, who is a word that says movement, going to action. So each emotion leads to an action. Fear will lead to the action fly or protect. In every way, protect yourself. The action of joy, for example, will be to go to another person, to share, to connect. That are actions enhanced by joy. And we already talked about the decision-making part. So emotions are really guides. And that is the first thing when we work with people in organization. It's really mind transforming to say that emotions are there to help me and not just to hijack me. And each emotion has its own message, specific role, and we work on this because this is the basis if you want to use emotion in an intelligent way. Furthermore, what are emotions? Emotions are defined as multi-component processes. Often we just see emotional response. We see a change in the facial expression, or in the posture, or in the behavior, our heart rate change. So that's the emotional response. That's often what is the most visible. But there is something before. So emotions arise in situations. And in situations we will have triggers. Triggers for, we talked about, fear will be danger. For anger, we also talked about. Each emotion has its own trigger. But it does not, it's not sufficient. To have an emotion as the outcome, I have to pay attention to the situation. I have to deploy my attention to look at the situation. For example, I find another example. When people come a little bit late, my attention is sweeping, so it disturbs me. That's because we have attention process. And that is really central in emotion. You know, we went from France, and if my attention don't go to my children at home with my mother, I will not have an emotion about. So we really need this attention to put on a situation, otherwise we will not have an emotion. And next step is, when I look at the situation, then there is a cognitive uprisal process starting. I will ask myself, is this situation really new? Or do I have behavioral response schemes? If I don't have, my emotion intensity will highly rise. So also, is this situation pleasant, unpleasant? Is the situation an opportunity to go to my goals? Or not. So we have a cognitive uprisal process. And this cognitive uprisal process will finally bring emotions response. So we have a trigger, we have to put our attention on, and then cognitive uprisal process starts. And this process will determine if my emotion is pleasant or unpleasant, and also the intensity of the emotion. And once the emotion is there, the emotion will have benefits or risks. It depends on my ability to manage them. So the real trigger of emotion is cognitive uprising. It's not because I have a project to manage that the project is my trigger of emotion. In this situation, I will have an uprising process and tell myself, perhaps I don't have all the resources, perhaps it's difficult. And this uprising process leads to emotion. Okay? So now the emotional intelligence, the intelligence component.
So I will take on a little bit over on that. So we have seen that emotions seem to be a quite different element from what we usually think of intelligence. And indeed, the first time that emotional intelligence appeared as a single concept was quite surprising, because, and it was quite recent as well, as you can see in the dates. Usually, emotions and intelligence were used to be referred as something like cognitive and cognitive words, and they were really living in separate fields of inquiry and study. Starting from the 90s, thanks to Mayer and Salovey, emotional intelligence appeared as an actual holistic concept. So what do we really mean when we talk about emotional intelligence? Well, we could say that there's two ways that emotional intelligence has been understood today. Some people see, some researchers see emotional intelligence as something which is an ability. So practically saying as a type of intelligence. Just like we have our ability to orient in space, ability to deal with quantitative information, emotional intelligence would be such an ability associated with emotions. Others, on the other hand, see emotional intelligence more as a personality aspect, kind of a disposition or a preference. So those two approaches do have quite different consequences. So we'll quickly see what the differences would be, depending on their approach. If we conceive of emotional intelligence as a personality disposition, then to some extent it's also something that we are with, that describes us. It could be seen as a mix of both personality, motivation, dispositions, which all are comprised together and lead us to a certain type of behavior, attitudes, and ways of dealing with situations which are emotionally charged. On practical terms, that would mean that most approaches, and which is the case, most researchers who conceive of emotional intelligence as a personality trait tend to assess and measure it as a personality trait. Meaning that in practical assessments, people will be asked to say how well or how frequently they think they can do something, or they're able to do something. It's about self-perception, right? So it would be as if we're talking about spatial intelligence, and I would ask you, how good do you think you would be at rotating a complex shape in space, right? In terms of intelligence, that might be a little counterintuitive, because practically how well I think I could do it might be quite different from what I actually can do. And this is the main difference with a more ability approach. When we conceive of emotional intelligence as an ability, then we really enter in the world of intelligence per se. Because in this context, we conceive of it as composed of a certain number of distinct competencies, or we could even say skills, that could be developed and assessed. And all of them together functioning at certain levels would lead us to be emotionally intelligent and be able to act and be in the world in an emotionally intelligent manner. So in this case, obviously, when we would want to assess somebody's ability in emotional intelligence, it wouldn't make much sense to ask people how they think they're good. We would then need to approach it just as any other kind of intelligence test. We would give them a task, we would ask them to perform it, and based on their performance, we would decide, or we would assess what is their level of mastery of this ability or this competency. just like you usually do in other type of intelligence tests. You know, you're shown a complex shape and you're being asked, if I look at it from this angle, what will it look like? Practically speaking, that starts seeming a little more complicated, because with emotional information, how could we really conceive of an ability assessment of emotional intelligence? So this is where we started from, and this is where the need for a real ability perspective on emotional intelligence appeared to us. We were clearly going towards an ability approach of intelligence, because for us it's a competency-related ability. So we would be able to identify individual skills and competencies that would compose it, and then being able to assess each of them individually in order to help people make kind of a starting point of their competence. So towards a new model of EI, in our definition to start with, we have identified, mostly based on the emotion process, also based on our understanding of intelligence, that there are two main clusters of competencies. First, there is a set of competencies which have to do with diagnosis. The ability of one person to diagnose his or others' emotional states. Because before we're able to know before we have to do something with it, we first need to be able to clearly understand what we're facing. So diagnostic would be a first set of competencies. The second set of competencies revolves around the idea of tactical, strategic, and regulatory use of emotions in order to reach a certain performance, achieve well-being, or function in an emotionally intelligent manner. So practically in our model, Lisa will tell us a little more about all those competencies that we have identified.
As you see, we have 7 competencies, and they are grouped, as Masha just said, in diagnose, in the diagnose factor and the tactic factor. So it's a process model, it's a stepwise model. We came from one to the next step. I will just go through with you of all the steps. So scanning body symptoms. The first information where you can, that lead us to diagnose an emotion, it's often our body symptoms. So when I perceive movements, the first thing is to know, is it a modification linked to emotion, or for example, because I did a jogging, I jogged around, I ran a little bit, or I had really high cognitive activity. This is not emotion. So that's the first thing about the perception of these symptoms. And then we link them because each emotion has its own physical pattern. So we have to identify the rhythm, we identify the energy emotion brings to us, or the tension in muscles. And this ability is first about identifying my own emotion, but we also know today that when you are an expert here, you can feel in your body the emotion another person experiences. You know that we have mirror neurons, and this is really interesting also because sometimes we can be contaminated by emotions of others because our body reproduces them. So that's scanning body symptoms. The ability to feel and then interpret the resonance of an emotion in my body and to link it to a specific emotion. But emotions are a multi-component process, and we just saw before that we have a little bit more cues. It's not just in your body. Emotion also modify our expression, facial expression. You have Ekman who did a lot of work on it, and you have also behavioral change. Your thoughts are also modified, and here it is more we interpret all these different cues and we look if they point to the same emotion. You know, sometimes we have people, they say, I'm angry, but they tell you, okay, I want to run away. The situation where I prefer to avoid it. So there's clearly something that don't fit. Anger is not an emotion that leads to behavior where you want to run away. That's more about fear. So here, when we take all these cues, we have to look, are they going to one specific emotion? Or because humans are sometimes a bit complex, we can have two or more emotions at the same time. So we analyze, like Sherlock Holmes, all these cues and look which emotion do they point to. Interpreting emotional cues. And then we have identifying the source of emotion. As you saw when I presented the emotion process, there are always triggers. Each emotion has its own trigger, and it's specific. Danger is not the trigger of sadness. Sadness is about loss, and danger is about fear. So each emotion has its own trigger. Pride, it's not the same trigger as joy. When we feel pride, there's something about effort, really investment. And we can feel joy without investment in something. I just can feel joy walking in a wood. There's no effort in it. I will not feel proud in this situation, okay? So each emotion has its own trigger, and it's a real ability to connect the emotion you feel or the emotion another person feels to a trigger. Why? Because if you know this, finally you can a little bit choose your emotional future. You can choose to have time to work on the emotional concept, what we really love, and it gives us a lot of joy and interest. So we can choose to put it in our agenda at least 2 times a week. So at least this times I trigger this emotion. Okay, so understanding this trigger part, it's really the first element that helps you to choose your emotional future. Now we go more in the strategic part, in the tactical part, okay? We did our diagnostic, we talked on the body, we have other cues and the trigger, and now I know which emotion I have to deal with. So next step is I look at this emotion and I ask myself, which is the intensity of each of one? Why is this question so important? It's because as a function of intensity, I will not have the same outcomes. So this step is really important when you go to tactic. You will accurately identify the emotion in the family. A little anger is not a little fear. That's the first thing. You identify the family. And in the family, you then identify the intensity. But it's also a lot about differentiation. A little anger, it is not a little fear. What are the differences here? Okay? So here also we can start about thinking about the emotional future. Because if I feel a little fear, like apprehension, and I do nothing, where will it evolve to? Okay, apprehension will evolve to fear, and if I don't do anything, what will come? Like terror? So here also I can start to predict emotional evolution. And that's a quite important point when I want to manage them. Okay? I also already introduced this dimension. It's about anticipating the emotional outcomes. We talked about that each emotion has an adaptive function. And that's why an emotion has outcomes. So if we talk about fear, we already said it enhances our ability to be focused. We have attention, concentration. We are ready for action. And also, fear at a moderate level enhances creativity, innovation. So if I know this positive intention, finally I can use this emotion. Or when I feel it, I can say, okay, the risk is panic, but there are virtues. So what can I do to connect to these virtues in my own, and if I'm a manager, in an employee or in my group, in my team? So this is about knowing the positive attention and the risk of a whole range of emotion. And on the basis of this, I can finally select the best emotional state to feel or to express in a given situation. If I have to do a presentation like now, and I feel fear at a 7-point scale, like at 6, I can look at the risk and say, oh, fear, a 6 on a 7-point scale would be quite risky. Perhaps I will have a blackout, or I will not be able to speak. I will always say, oh, my English, is it good enough? And so I will have really, I start to feel it, not okay. So my selected state must be like a fear a bit lower, if it enhances my ability to connect to each one, to be vigilant. So it must be like a 3. But also what I can ask myself, is it the best emotional cocktail if I'm just speaking with fear at a 3 level? Perhaps a little bit of joy being here, a little bit of interest to all the questions you will ask to us after this presentation time will help me to make a better cocktail and to feel better. So what is this about? It's about the target emotional state. So the best state to perform and to guarantee well-being in myself, in a given situation, or in my team. There are parameters I can work on. First is intensity. We also talk about duration. If you want to do a brainstorm session and you need a little bit of anxiety, you have to stretch this emotion the whole session. Okay, so sometimes you have to stretch or shorten emotion. And you can activate resource emotion. And this allows you to define the best emotional state to your situation. The emotional state that helps you to achieve your goal. And then the last step, it's about emotional regulation. Once I have this state, the question is, how can I go to this? How can I activate this state? And that's about emotion regulation process. And here we have different families of strategies. Actually, we have 5 strategies. Connect to the emotion multi-component process, you will find managing emotions on a situational level. You can modify the situation. You can, for example, come with colleagues to make a conference. So I'm not alone in front of you all. So I have a modification in my situation. Also, sometimes you train. If you have a presentation or an examen or a training, you train before doing it. So what do? You modify your situation. After, we have attentional redeployment. For example, when you have fear, your attention is fixed on everything what is danger. You are fixed on dangerous cues. And what you can do is redeploy your attention to all the things that are secure. So this is where I put my eyes, actually, and you can change it. After, we have cognitive reappraisal. In a given situation, sometimes you say, oh, if I don't reach this goal, it's just a total catastrophic. Okay? But perhaps it's just on a 10-point scale, like 3 points of catastrophe. Okay? So you say there's not as much stakes in, exactly. Reevaluation, reappraisal. Or you say it's an unpleasant situation, but perhaps not as unpleasant as that. Finally, there are also pleasant aspects. We all call this reappraisal. Then you have on the emotional response, strategies that allow us to manage the emotional response. You have your heartbeat that go up. You have all these things of manifestation of anxiety. You can breathe. Also, you can often, when you have anxiety or anger, your shoulders go up and you have more tense. You can actually consciously let it go, this tension. Other aspect is, if we express an emotion, we will activate in us. That's a lovely work of Ekman also. So if you take position of pride when you have anxiety, yeah, it will moderate it, because finally this new emotion will rise in you. So we call all this response modification strategies. We have a last one. It's about social support. This strategy is a bit different because it helps in each other of the families. You can have social support to modify a situation, to redeploy your attention, to reevaluate situations, and to change response, emotional response. So it's like a strategy that helps all the other strategies. These are 5 families of emotion. And what we are doing in training is to understand where are your preferences so that you become really flexible in all the strategies. Okay? So now we talked about this 7-step model. You remember diagnose, 3 competences, tactical part, 4 competences. We will, with Anna, show you how which are the applications of all this, okay?
So first of all, let me introduce you 3 levels of our interventions. So 3 levels of application of this model for managers and also for organization. First of all, we are working with individuals. It will be the first level of our work, of our intervention. How we work with the individuals through measuring, through assessment of emotional competencies with our measure tool, and also offering to the people emotional intelligence coaching. The second part of our work is more on the group level. Let's say with teams, with a group of managers, or with group of employees in the same job or in the same department, and we could adjust and fine-tune some approaches. Maybe it will be the training, so we will be focusing more on competencies, on developing abilities, but also it could be the team building. In this way we will speak how it could be matching between persons with different levels of emotional competencies, and also group cohesion. When we are working with executives boards, it's really important to create a really cohesion in the way of they are working together. And at the end, we are opening always an organizational perspective of work. While when we are working with emotional intelligence of one manager, I would say it's not enough. We go to open this area of competencies of all managers inside the organization, and going further to create an emotional intelligence climate in order to, I would say, to spray emotional intelligence through organization and establish rules, norms, charts, how it works. So touching the culture of the company, of the organization. So it's really 3 different levels, often linked between individual level, group level, organizational level. But sometimes it could be separate, sometimes linked between. So some examples. First of all, working with emotional intelligence in organization, it's something like go for the excellence. While we know precisely that emotional intelligence will develop performance crossed with well-being. So we will face a more efficient, more fulfillment people, and it's really important for organization now in front of a lot of intensity in work, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of different changes. And some contexts that we are working precisely, for example, for individual level, it will be take some people from organization and working of developing abilities. So the person will take the test and we will see what is precisely the photo of emotional competencies. Okay, you're quite strong in regulation, but you are not really strong in diagnosis. It's a kind of typical profile for managers. They regulate always the emotions. I'm anger at the workplace, so slow down my anger. But I didn't thought about why I have the anger. What is the trigger? What is the precisely body symptoms? I'm connecting to my emotion or not. So it will be the individual work through coaching sessions, through understanding what is the sense to feel anger, what is the outcomes, what is my personal triggers to be in anger. maybe I'm as a manager, I'm coming to see the team and they don't do what I ask to do. So I have an anger. Okay, it's justified, well, it's kind of injustice. But maybe I have an anger while we lost the project. So it will be not justified, while the loss, it's more about sadness. And we will work with managers about their beliefs, about their vision of emotion. And as Lisa explained, it's really important to transform the vision of emotions. And I remember of one female manager, she was really expert in our scaling, quite about all competencies. And now we will feel it through phone calls, through behaviors of the managers inside the organization, through mailing, while all expert people will be really without taboo on emotions, will show, will express, will transform each emotional moment to the resources. And so it's really individual and really practical work also, while we will give some experimental task.
Experiential task.
I got it. Experiential task, so the person will apply the new abilities to the concrete work situation in order to say, okay, now you will have the meeting, how you will set up the meeting to create the best emotional state for you and also for the team. Practice it, go into practice and be back to do the brief, how it was, what you succeed to do, and what maybe was difficult to manage in your emotional state. So it's a big work on each person with really preparing different contexts for the person. International mobility, promotion, internal mobility, and also in some difficult cases we meet a lot of managers exhausted, with anxiety, overloaded by the work and uncertain environment. So it will be also the work how we will regulate the emotions, while maybe they are quite good in diagnosis, but they don't have the tools how to regulate the emotions, how to deal with. So in this way we will put an accent more how to transform emotions in resources. And maybe you could introduce your example, Lisa, about international mobility. While it was it was quite really significant experience for us.
We had a person that came to us because his organization gave him the opportunity to go to Canada. Okay, from France to Canada, perhaps you think it's like French-speaking area, but there are quite a lot of differences, even perhaps. But I think even if it's a difficulty because you say it's like they speak French and that you underestimate the difference. So we worked with him preparing how to meet the team, which emotional climate you want to install. So we did first also screening of the competencies and then started our work. And we went to how is the first meeting? What do you want to implement for an emotional climate? Say, okay, I want interest because I need engagement. I also need that people feel confident and competent because there's change. Okay, we say, so which is the emotion you need? Oh, it's about pride. Okay, so we defined really the target emotions, and he wants to install in the emotional climate. And also the emotions he needs perhaps to manage, like say, okay, there's probably a lot of fear because it's change, I'm a French, I'm not from Montreal, so there will be a bit like, who are you, you know? So how can I manage all this? And then we worked on the strategies to help him to achieve the emotional climate. And in between sessions, I know he had really, he did interviews, for example, with a person, with a friend he knew, not too close, but a steady friend. And it was, okay, in this interview, I want really to understand what are your passions, what do you love in your job? And that is a practical work. So we worked with him on the specific emotions that he will face once in his new environment. And we prepared him also on the emotional part. I remember because he did not feel fear by going there. And we asked him, okay, isn't it a bit risky to not feel fear while preparing a move from France to Montreal, to Canada? He said, oh, if I look at the benefits of fear, perhaps it would be interesting to feel this emotion, because it will lead to more preparation, anticipation, and look a bit at all the potential difficulties I could face, like be a little bit isolated, because he had a lot of friends in France. But how can you create this social connection when you come in a new country? So we had emotional work on how to work with the team, and the individuals in the team, each one. And then we also had this work to prepare him to really emotionally to be prepared for what he will live. Because when you go to another country, yeah, you change also your environment, so you have to prepare also this a little bit. So these are examples of, we do this in mobility coaching. Emotion, finally, is always the aspect, because you can do it on a lot of ways, this type of coaching. Our point is always the emotional scope.
Yeah. And what's interesting in this example, while we know from studies that emotional intelligence helps in intercultural situations. So it was for us a really successful story to see it precisely in practice, how it helps. And another word that Lisa mentioned is how to recruit, how to select, how to assess, to do assessment for people. So we put internal mobility, but it could be also recruitment, and ask precise question, what is your passion, what is your interest, and do it in emotional manner of doing, to see how the person is dealing with this emotion, how he is able to deal with different emotions further in his or her job. And Lisa introduced already this dimension of working with manager and team, to working with all managers from department or from a big division. In this way, the manager is the better trigger in the team, emotional trigger. So how the manager will modeling emotional intelligence, it will be also the answer in the team, in the group around. So it's important to introduce this group level, how it will communicate. And I remember a manager, he has a fear only in Alps, in the mountains, and only when he is standing in front of precipice, a big, okay, thank you. And it was the only occasion to feel fear. And professionally speaking, in the company, it was a big car company in Switzerland. Professionally, it was really moving in his marketing department. It was a lot of changes, a lot of people coming, changing. Some professional challenges was changing from day to day, while the market was really moving. And in this way, for him, it was not understandable, while the people were anxious, while they have fear, while they are in this kind of febrile situation. While it's not dangerous, the changes, it's not dangerous, the environment moving. And when we worked with him on triggers and with the team, what is your specific trigger on fear, of anxiety? So it became clear why the climate in the team, why the communication in the team was not optimal. We put also change management like a whole domain of intervention. We worked with Lisa for the big real estate company. And it was a big restructuring, fusing, buying one company by another one, and a lot of stress in employees, a lot of, I would say, informal exchanges, increasing the anxiety in each employee. So in this way, the managers, it was important to face this level of high stress in employees and be able to deal with it. So our work was to prepare the managers and to develop their emotional abilities to deal with the stress of employees. And we did it step by step, beginning with executive board, going to the manager level, and then we worked also through workshops with employees, how to deal with my emotions, which kind of emotions I have in change situation. So it was really interesting to prepare employees to take part of change and to go through change and accept it and to be more performant than stressful.
Yeah, and we really worked also on this point that we have emotions that can help change. And sometimes that are not the emotions that are the most likely to manage. Yeah. For example, anger is a change emotion. Anger is an emotion that is there for the need of change. But it's the question, it's the anger again, or this energy, can you take it for the change and make it a helpful, a resource? So that was something we worked about, how to canalize anger, this superpower energy, in a way that helps the change we are living. Or also fear. We even worked with managers because they told us, yeah, we have some really excited person about the change. So, and we say, yeah, would be perhaps interesting to activate a little bit of fear in this person. And that's what? Like you are coming from out of the universe. Why do you want me to implement fear in my employees? Yeah, but if you do change without fear, it's quite risky, because fear will puts your vigilance on and helps you to say, okay, perhaps I will verify that I have enough resources to manage the situation, not to put all my energy in the beginning, because it's change project is about 1-2 years, so I will be more careful about putting a little bit energy all the time and not all the energy at the beginning and then finish exhausted. So we really worked on this idea that the emotion have specific roles and that we have to connect to these roles in a change context. And that was really transforming for the managers, because sometimes they were about, I don't want to deal with this anger or sadness. And then we say, it is important to go through this. Sadness is about acceptance. And if change is not about acceptance, I don't know what it is about. When things change, there are things I have to accept that they will never be as they were before. And I need to accept that. But I also need the anger to overcome it, perhaps, and the fear to be careful, and perhaps interest and enthusiasm. But I also need these other emotions. And so it's really something we love to work with, is this question about emotional climate. Which is the best cocktail for a given situation? And that's what we try to share with the managers and CEOs we train.
So it's already a good link to say, okay, we could work on an emotional intelligence with individuals, with groups, with managers, with managerial level, but it's also coming from this work quite spontaneous, quite naturally, the work about the norms and emotional intelligence climate inside the organization. As Lisa said, how we deal with some unpleasant emotions, how we would like to promote pleasant emotions. We spoke about this balance inside the, I would say, person, but also inside the organizations. How to promote 5 pleasant emotions. If we have an unpleasant emotion, we lost the project or we lost the client, etc. So it's really to create the balance between unpleasant and pleasant emotions. And in this way we are working also on creation and promoting some networks of people in France and in Europe. It's particular maybe context, I don't know really, but we are really promoting the happiness inside the organizations. Maybe it's also existing chief happiness officer, And the question is how to prevent exhaustion, how to prevent burnout, how to deal with intensity of work. So in this way we prepare the networks of ambassadors that will be able to detect and to be attentive to all unpleasant emotion signs or losing this balance between in emotional climate. So it's really important for us to promote this kind of interventions and put the right norms, interesting values for organizations.
I give an example because I really love, sometimes it can be like a bit abstract, you know, like, but it's really concrete. We had to work with a board, and there were tensions, and everywhere you have tensions sometimes, but all depends on how you deal and what are the rules we give to each other when this tension comes. So they invited a rule. I really love this rule, and I think I like to apply it with my children also. It's when you are in a situation and conflict rise, so anger rise in your relationship, and you feel that you're getting aggressive in your way of communication. So everybody can say stop and invoke this rule. And this rule was about positive reconsideration. So we stop our discussion on the topic that is tense. And if I'm with Anna, for example, I will recall all the qualities Anna has for the project and why we love to work together at all. And we recall this. Then Anna does the same for me. We thank each other. And then we go back to the situation where tension came up. And really you will look differently at that moment on the tense subject. Because you did this reconsideration that it is not on a personal level, that we all are good professionals and have qualities to work on this project, but tension can arise. But when tension arises and we forgot why we are there, why we love to work with the other person, that it really can get difficult to manage. So that was one rule they invented, and they call it the positive reconsideration. So we are not coming with rules, you know, because who are we to know all the best rules for a group, for a company? We came with, okay, think about. Okay, we have some ideas, but think about. And we are really always surprised by the creativity of the teams we meet, and the innovation of adaptive rules they create. So we create charts after. They can be shared with the employee level. They get charts to be shared with the managers who are guarantees, who can really be aware, is it respected or not, and make that these rules are lived in the organization.
And it could be some charts, as you said, about how to deal with emotions, but it could be also some, I would say, open cultural rules, not always formal, but we would like to promote more creativity, more innovation in our organization. So we will deal with our emotional state to be prepared to do this kind of work. So it will maybe not written, but discussed and emerged like a group rules.
Totally.
So,
there's
the three levels to go for the excellence for enterprises, for companies, for individuals, and for sure you have already some questions. So I will give you this time maybe.
Yes, please.
I guess just a basic question about how do managers deal with the problem of like exhaustion, right? Exhaustion, and how does that, like what comes first, like mental illness and then exhaustion, or exhaustion plus then mental illness? And is that a short-term thing, or does that happen like in a short term, or is it like something that builds cumulatively over a long period of time? What have you observed on that? And that's pretty much it. The second aspect, if you could address, would be, emotions. Emotions seem like a very complex thing. Like it would be something that is to be managed on a daily basis as far as an organizational climate is concerned. How does competitiveness and workplace politics affect, the authenticity of how emotional climate in an organization is managed?
Tu réponds sur le burn-out ou tu veux que je réponde? Okay, so two questions. First question, and after the second, more about the benefits or impact. So about the question about exhaustion, I think, exhaustion is one of the dimensions of burnout. You have one of the dimensions. And is it already mental illness or it depends how you see it. Exhaustion often comes at the first stage and you will get in the whole burnout after, But it is not, it's a long way to go there. We often see people who have a lot of energy, they are really invested in work, engaged, and they don't see the signs that they need to rest. And they always go on. We see people who have a lot of interest, a lot of pride, who love their work, enthusiastic. Or see sometimes they are afraid, they have a profile where they say, is it right what I'm doing? They love to do right things, A person who goes to exhaustion is not a person that is, I do just my job, It's a really engaged person, and we love these persons, I prefer to have someone working with me who at 5 o'clock, if I have work, says, okay, I can work until 7 in the evening, no problem, We all prefer this person. So that is also, often you have this person, they don't say no. Okay, so you have a lot of signs before. You have signs before because memory gets difficult. So at once you will start to note everything, and you will note more and more. You have errors. You do little things that normally you do right, and then you don't do them right. You take more time to do the same things. First, I don't know, you take for it like 30 minutes, and then 1 hour 30. It's difficult, And you have more and more feel of anxiety that takes place. And these signs, often people, they just say, okay, no, it's a time. We finish this project, after it will be better. And they forget that you can't always say, okay, it will get better. You have to create the conditions to slow down. And so, I think they go in this process. It's like the person I think about always like, some months. Months for sure. And you have several months to get out of it.
And the practical example I work a lot with the care area, and the people is going quite rapid to exhaustion, while it's a lot of relationship, a lot of affective, emotionally charged relationship. And I think about one client, they introduce emotion as a value inside the organization. So they say, we pay attention to emotions. And one time, they don't see the disgust of one of the managers. And it was problematic why this disgust was not seen, was not understood by the person itself. And it's going grow up till, I would say, quite hard body symptoms. And at the end it was too late. So, and the second time, with putting the emotion value inside the organization, it was not so late to intervene. So they were more aware of changing the emotional state of another manager and say, she's a little bit more anxious as usual. Maybe she needs something. And it was quite quick decision from general manager, okay, do you need some emotional coach to deal with it? Yes, I do it. And in 5-6 sessions, 2-3 months, it was okay. The person find how to deal with her anxiety, and she was connected to other emotional resources, and she understood the trigger of her anxiety, and it was gone. So if we put this emotional focus, we could find the state before it's too late.
Yeah, before the person gets stuck in it, actually, you know. And I think that's the problem. Often burnout, the person gets stuck in like, I don't know, hamster. That's, yeah, a hamster in a wheel, you know, chuck, chuck, chuck. And the person really gets stuck in. And then you have this guilt problem that comes over this first emotion like disgust or anxiety, because the guilt is about, I'm not doing enough. And it puts more and more pressure on, you know. And that's, when we have rupture, it's quite, I always find it like super fascinating, you know. A person really had breakdown. It's the burnout, it's one of the elements that one day the person can't get up again. You know, it's so exhausted. I had a person, 3 weeks, she could not get up from her bed. You imagine? 3 weeks you are stuck in a bed because physically you don't have any energy. We had another, because men, it's more about action, behavior, manifestation. And we had one, they called, okay, I don't know where I am, I am somewhere, please fetch me. You know, and he was like, he took a car, 300 kilometers later, he stopped somewhere, and it was just, okay, ask someone where you are, and we will send someone, you know. And sometimes it's really a rupture. And you have like minimum 6 months, often 1 year, and often the person can't go back to the workplace.
And to do the link with the model, I think to develop the diagnosis abilities of managers, to see emotion in others, to see the timelines of emotions, a very precise level of intensity, allow them to see when it's already the time to do something, when it's the time to offer the regulation to the person or not go further in the burnout process. So this kind of abilities in managers will be really helpful in organizations.
And we have to be careful at the intercultural, because we had a situation, and we talked about diagnose, and the person, it was an Indian person, said, oh, I'm like on 5 on a 7-point scale on anxiety, okay? And I just thought it was like a 2, you know? So that's also, and here it's because intercultural context, but I remember one person who did a burnout, and I worked on his manager and him on the relationship, because we tried that he can stay in the job. And the manager said, I didn't see. And the other person said, but I came to see you, I don't know any priority anymore, I lack of resources. And she said, yeah, but you were so calm telling me all this. And everyone tells me here in this organization they need more resources, so I didn't check that. Okay, so let's imagine a scale. And then we can talk. And they put it in place to have the scales and to talk, okay, for me it's a 5 here. Okay, I thought it's a 2. Okay, now we can work on it like it is a 5. You know, it seems a little bizarre perhaps, but we don't have the same scale sometimes. And really we need to learn to talk about it and to exchange about it. Okay, you feel something, tell me the intensity. Intensity is so, so important. Okay, yes?
Hi, you have been talking about emotional intelligence for managers. And you also shared a very interesting point on how fear is a very important emotion, and how the manager moved from France to Canada, and he wasn't experiencing as much fear as you would like him to have. So this question is about fear, and how about a manager who steps into a leadership role? Is the emotional cocktail different for managers versus that of leaders?
Tu veux? It's about vision. Yeah, I think it's a question. We have a lot of work on enhance your communication by emotion. Often when you talk, you think about like what I have to say, but you forget to put the undertext of emotion. And what we really do with leaders, often we work on this. We work on, okay, this level is, I want to make energy, so in this part I have to put perhaps a little bit anger under. When I talk of, yeah, we will really be one of the best teams, you can't say this with joy. Yeah, you know, it will not, you need focalized energy. So we really work with them to enhance communication by the undertext of emotion. We have a lovely French comedian. It's he say a sentence. It's a terrible sentence. It's if you are condemned to it's about law, and we have to un condamné à mort aura la tête tranchée. A person who is condemned to death, his head will cut off. Okay. It's a really bad sentence, not really nice emotionally. And what he will do in 5 minutes about, he will say it on a happy emotion, on a fear emotion, on a interest emotion, and what you get is the emotional message. And you will laugh when you hear the sentence in the happy, interested. And so it's really about leaders who share vision. They really know where to put which emotion in. And they also put these unpleasant emotions of fear. It will not be easy to go there because it's a really huge way and we don't have all the resources. But I believe in you. So we have fear, and then you put a bit pride. And they are really, really precise users of this. And that you can really train. But this is all about, I think, a good leader, he always has a little bit of anxiety. Not too much, but just when we say, you know, like who is the emotional intelligent leader? And some studies say, yeah, it's an extroverted, hyper-communicative, and that's not what we find out. We find out like more a humble person, a person that is a little bit anxious about performance, of my impact on others, and on this basis, he really, really gets in touch with persons, is able to connect on an empathic level, and then takes the persons with him. Yeah? So that's like the emotional flat line, I don't know. They always have this. Did I answer? A little kind of? Okay.
What I got from your answer is that it doesn't matter if the person is a leader or a manager. There is one aspect that all persons can improve on. That is communicating with emotion and not dissecting emotion from the way you're communicating.
Totally.
Well,
And so a manager can be a leader.
Manager can be a leader.
Totally. Mm.
Actually, if I can rephrase what you're saying, all people can improve on all the competencies.
Totally.
That's a given. The question is, depending on your goal, what are the tools that you will use more than others? For example, if you're an employee, it might be a little less important to work on your ability to communicate emotions to a large group through a discourse, because you just won't have to do that. But, for example, the ability for even an employee to be able to communicate the right emotional subtext in an email
Totally important.
can be extremely powerful tool to ensure a better performance if he deals with clients, for example. So reflecting on beyond the content, what's the emotional subtext, where am I bringing the person from, and what am I leaving? We usually call it the emotional imprint that you leave on the person after an interaction. Those things might make a big difference because that emotional experience the person will have will lead to a certain type of behavior, attitude, thoughts, etc.
So all that process is useful at any level. It might just be applied with different tools.
It's really useful at any level. And what we see now, it's this emotional print. It's the manager who gives the emotional color of the team. Because if I have an angry manager, okay, and his imprint, it's always like anger and frustration. The team makes a comparison process, and they will compare to the hierarchical upper level. And that's quite important why we work a lot with managers. It's because they have to reflect on what emotional imprint they want to let when they go away. And so it's in 70 microseconds, this process. So it's so highly, highly quick. And that's why it's important at every level. But I think also why we often start with managers, it's because you can have the best motivated co-worker if you have a manager that leads a toxic print everywhere. It's really complicated to have a good climate in a team, even if all the people in the team are in more like happy, optimistic constitution. The climate will be printed by the manager.
Yes, you have a question?
So we were talking about goal setting with the emotional culture within the organization. Now, when making decisions for those goals, how do you ensure that your decision process isn't affected by your own emotions? Does that make sense?
If I understand right, it's if I decide about goals, I am in decision process, how to deal with my impact on this decision?
When you make a decision to go for a certain emotional environment,
Yeah.
how do you ensure that that is not affected by your own
Ah.
emotions?
I am not sure if you have to be sure that it is not affected by your own emotion.
But wouldn't that sort of overarch the rationality of the decision?
We think about emotional climate. If you say, I want to go to more positive emotional climate in my organization, I think it's a highly emotional decision. It's an emotional decision because it's about I have to perform in my environment, otherwise my organization is not competitive. Okay, so that's a quite fear-driven decision. Also, it's about, yeah, I want more well-being because I know well-being enhances performance. So this is also an emotional-driven, I want more well-being. It's like I want more pleasant emotion in my daily work life. So that's, I think it's driven about this need of a balance and emotion and performance in your organization. So isn't it about to be conscious about the emotions you feel and then apply it to a decision process, you know? And we implemented like quality of life in organization. And the most efficient we implemented was because we had highly emotionally involved HR and CEOs. Because they were really highly involved in it, and they get even angry when it was not respected, and the group that worked on this quality of life, they came late for meetings. They said, no, it's really important, you have to be there, you know. So I think these emotions you feel when you implement it will also be your guideline to have the energy to bring the project up, to realize it, to be careful if there are behaviors that are destructive against this climate. You also have to feel anger and say, no, that is not okay. We respect what we decide, you know. So I think, yeah, you have to use emotion as a tool to implement the decisions, even if it's about emotion. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again for coming and meeting with us.
Thank you.
Allow me to end the talk. Jingle tradition.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. And thank you.
Merci.
Yeah,